recording now. It missed my great intro, but that's okay. So again, the final report surveys the ongoing and compounding harms experienced by African Americans as a result of slavery and its lingering effects. It took 2 years for the task force to complete this really thorough report. And, a lot of people that I talk to don't even know that this report came out. The report that it was developed by the task force, who we hope to have Lisa Holder on the call to be able to shed more light on, was developed through a series of community listening sessions, personal testimonies, oral histories, statewide surveys, and it also involved a lot of research and input from historians, economists, and other academics. And so the history and the facts are laid out in this report, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this call going through the report findings and the recommendations. I really encourage you to read the report on your own time. And there is a shorter executive summary. It's about 75 pages, I think, if you want to read the shorter version. So our goal today is really to both build awareness of the report, but also to focus on how are we as a community going to continue to build momentum towards repair, restitution, and healing. And we're really lucky to have leaders here today on the call to be able to talk about how the work is moving forward on the ground in various capacities. And we want to be able to leave our attendees with really actionable ideas on how do we garner more community support on this issue. Now, we are still having a hard time getting Lisa onto the Zoom. And so if I may, just for a second, I'm gonna pop off and check and see if we can get her on. And if we can't, we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna introduce Dr. Travis Bristol in a second. Okay, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Travis Bristol. He's an associate professor of education, of teacher education and education policy at the University of California, Berkeley, at Cal Berkeley School of Education. Dr. Bristol's research explores the role of educational policies in shaping teacher workplace experiences and race and gender in educational settings. His scholarship has appeared in over 60 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, policy briefs, and opinion editorials. Dr. Bristol is board chair of the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards Board of Directors. He is the first African-American to hold this position. Dr. Bristol also chairs the California Department of Education Teacher Diversity Advisor Group. Welcome, Travis. Thank you. So while we try to get Lisa in to the call, I'd love to talk to you, Travis, about education in terms of reparations. And people don't really associate reparations with education often. It's interesting because I became more informed about the California Reparations Report actually through the educational system, through my daughter's public school district. So please talk a little bit about your work and how does it connect to the movement for reparations, not only within California, but also, outside of California.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, so my work connects, and some of the work I'm doing in the state connects directly in terms of the work of reparations. So next year, 2024, we're going to be celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Brown decision. So And what we know, right, the Brown decision was an attempt to integrate schools. And when Black children integrated into white schools, right, it didn't happen. White children did not integrate into Black schools. But when Black children integrated into white schools, their Black teachers did not follow them. In fact, in the South, 33,000 Black teachers were dismissed after the Brown decision. Many of those educators, teachers and educators, many of those educators were actually Black men. Most of those individuals were principals. And so currently my work chairing the state superintendent's educator diversity task force is to try to increase the number of teachers of color, Black teachers, given our conversation today. There's a clear body of evidence that when students, Black students have a Black teacher, their outcomes increase. There's also some research that when that white students, that they look around their schools and they do not see in this representative democracy Black teachers, and they have said one study published a couple of years ago that when surveyed, white students said that they wanted more teachers of color. They had a preference for teachers of color. And so this conversation about reparations, given that the current, currently 80% of teachers in the US are white, and yet 53% of students and currently about 53% of students are students of color, that this demographic mismatch that we see currently is in many ways a response to policies like Brown that integrated schools, but allowed for the dismissal of Black teachers. So currently some of my work is to think about how the state can increase the number of teachers of color, and in particular, Black teachers. I'll also say, and this is, you can find some of this in the report, we also know that Black students in particular do not have access to the most qualified teachers, because the way that funding works in the state of California, about 32% of the funding in schools come from local property taxes. So school districts that have a low property tax, those teachers are making less. Here in the state of California, there is an incentive program that if teachers pursue board certification, national board certification, those teachers receive a $5,000 pay increase. Now, what is board certification? 97% of doctors in the United States are board certified, which is to say there is a national board, and most of us, right, almost all of us, we don't even ask our doctors, we just assume that our doctors are board certified. That's not true. About 3% of teachers in the United States have board certification. Every state has their own certification. And so this is the highest form of certification, the gold standard of certification. And so what I am, some of the work I'm involved in here in the state is to get many more teachers to become board certified, who are working in schools that serve large numbers of Black children, and those teachers will get a $5,000 pay bump because of an incentive program at the state. So that's some of the work that I'm doing that's attending to some of the reparations conversation.
Well, it's good work, and I'm wondering if now that the task force has been completed, like, why do you feel like this is a really unique moment? Do you feel like this is a unique moment in the movement for reparations? And what are the kind of bright spots, and what are the challenges that you feel like that you're seeing to make forward progress on the issue?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is, so we in the United States believe that we are exceptional. And I think it's important to note that this conversation around reparations is one that the United States is playing catch up, right, in many ways. Some of my work, you asked some of this in a previous question, some of my work outside of the United States looks at the experiences of Black teachers in Latin America. So I'm studying the experiences of Black teachers in 4 Latin American countries: Colombia, Brazil, Uruguay, and Panama. And in Colombia and in Brazil in particular, those countries have large numbers of people of African descent who are there as a response of the transatlantic slave trade. And as a form of repair, right, in response to the harm caused by the transatlantic slave trade to people of African descent in Brazil and in Colombia, there is a mandated curriculum where everyone in the country has to learn about Black studies. And so I think it's important to situate our reparations conversation in the US in terms of a global conversation that we are joining, not leading. And so indeed, California is leading in terms of states, in terms of these kinds of, in terms of the reparations conversation. And what I see as a bright spot is some of the work that my colleague and I, Talani Britton, are attempting to do to make this, you talked about the 100-page document, to try to make this report a living document. And so one of the things that we're doing is we are, in some ways, mirroring some of the work that's happening in Brazil and in Colombia and in some small districts across the country, working to create a Black Studies curriculum. And this Black Studies curriculum will allow the reparations report to be a living document, so that, as you know, I teach undergraduate students at Cal, so that when my undergraduate students come to me, they are aware of the historic harm caused by the state and by the federal government to Black people living in California, and so that they are more knowledgeable about how they can, in the jobs that they have post-graduation, work to repair some of the harm. But they have to actually learn about it, and they can't, and we can't afford for them to get to Cal, where I'm teaching them, in order for them to learn about it. So this is a K-12 curriculum that we are designing that makes the reparations report a living document.
And so many people on this call today want to be allies in terms of the fight for racial and economic justice. So how do you think that people on this call can what are things that you think that they can do to help change the discourse, to garner more public support in order to be able to fund something like making, having a full K through 12 or grade specific education around Black studies within the state of California? Like what do you think needs to happen that we on this call can do to help support?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. And I'll talk about how this might look and what support might look on a couple of levels. First, I think there's some misinformation around polling and what polls have suggested around the ways that Californians believe in financial payments. And so I think that what we need is, more accurate questions that help that really get and allow Californians to share their true beliefs around the idea of reparations. I think that, and unless we have good polling, I think then politicians aren't going to feel the need and urgency to act. The first job of any elected official is to get reelected, right? And so if elected officials do not believe that there's a critical mass of their constituents who believe in this work, then they're not going to act. And so one of the ways that the individuals in your circle can support is to one, to provide some political cover. So one, in terms of creating polling, accurate polling, and we need some work around that. Two, to create some political cover for politicians to really move on the recommendations that Lisa and her team, the folks on the task force, that they have outlined to the legislature. So we need action because the recommendations are clear. So there's will. I think we need will, and politicians, they need cover, and cover comes in the form of individuals willing to contribute to campaigns for folks who are running for office, who are running on this issue to repair the historic harm. There's also a need, the curriculum that we are designing at UC Berkeley. I should say that we were invited by the task force to create the curriculum. And Lisa, who will join us, Lisa is on our advisory board. So she's also advising the curriculum design team. And who are the curriculum design team? Californians. In June, my colleague and I issued a statewide call, in a statewide application where we invited current classroom teachers, students, high school students, as well as community-based educators, those individuals who are working in after-school programs, in carceral spaces, to come together and help us look at the report and then think about how to create and design a Black Studies curriculum. Well, resources matter. We are wanting, we believe that we owe it to individuals, if they're going to work on creating a curriculum, that we should compensate them. And so we are looking for resources to compensate the individuals who are on our design team. We also will want to bring the educators, a group of students across the state, to Berkeley or to Southern California, or to the Valley, to test out some of elements of the curriculum, to get some feedback on the curriculum. And those things will require resources. And so from where we sit, we've done the work of identifying a group, and actually we currently have 7 students, 3 teachers, and 3 community-based educators. And we had more individuals who applied than we could accept, right? And so there is a great need, but we've had very limited resources. So we could have only accepted the folks based on the resources that we have. And so the idea is to bring these individuals together to help them to do some iterative work, continuous improvement on the curriculum that we design. And then, our North Star is that this curriculum becomes one of the ethnic studies requirements here in the state, required for graduation.
So lots of people on this call that have accessed or advise resources, have resources. So it's critical, I think, to be thinking about how we are using our resources, and if we care about this issue and want to support it, that is something that we need to prioritize. So we have put it in the chat. Just sorry, I forgot that the chat was disabled, but you can submit questions in the Q&A. And we are receiving those. So please put your questions in the Q&A if you have any. Let's see. So Travis, do you have any questions for me? I wanted to make this more of a dialogue. And maybe Lisa, what we're gonna have to do, since she wasn't able to hop on, is we might have to record a conversation separately and send it to all the attendees as a, maybe that's our only option at this point. But just curious if there's any questions that you have of me in our work.
Yeah, I'm curious about how, what do you think is sort of preventing individuals of high net worth from really leaning in and investing in this conversation? Is it that there's a lack of knowledge, or there's not a sense of like where to get in so they can fit in? What do you think is I'm on the other side,
Mhm.
seeking the resources. I'm curious about, what do you think?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but in terms of my client base, I think that they are building their awareness, that they are continuing to educate and re-educate themselves on how they can be allies. And certainly, people have various capacities on of wealth and resources, and um, they have favorite charities and causes that they wish to give to, but they are I think continuing to rethink and try to be critical about is that enough? Is that getting us to the place that we want to go? And certainly, like wealth advisors, I myself, I think the best way that we can be supportive is, number one, wealth advisors need to be like what we're doing right now. They need to be in community. They need to be in conversation. They need to be in community with movement leaders, particularly Black leaders, because the problem much of the problem is many of our Black led organizations they're still getting like 2% of total philanthropic giving that happens through the year. That is not going to cut it.
Hmm.
That is an example right there of inequity. And so, can we change that? I believe that is something that we can. And then the second thing is, I think advisors shouldn't, if they want to support this issue, they can continue. Like, we are constantly having conversations with our clients about not only charitable giving, but what parts of their investment portfolio can they rethink risk. What does risk mean? Where are the funds being invested? Can the funds be invested to directly impact
Hmm.
BIPOC communities, Black-led organizations, and things like that? So those are just a couple ideas that I have. So we'll go ahead and go into some Q&A. We've got one question from Anne, where the question is, everything I've seen in newspapers about this subject dwells on the $5 million that was supposedly will be given to recipients. It seems like a non-starter because of that, and that more information, I think she would love more information on that. Is that something that you feel like you can comment on?
Yeah, so I know that at the end of this, you'll receive some of the some new news articles. So that the Los Angeles Times did a story with my colleague and I, Talani Britton, around the curriculum that we are designing as an extension of this reparations report, where we are inviting, encouraging, suggesting that students across the state have a more accurate understanding and history of the experiences of Black people. I don't think that is, it's not a $5 million ask, and so it's unfortunate that some of the work, like the curriculum project, isn't getting enough attention, because I think that teachers are hungry for tools, for content, and parents are hungry for their own children to learn a more accurate telling of the history of people of African descent in this state. And so, we need more news stories around this one slice of the reparations discussion.
Yes, and to add on to that, if you read the report, there is a series of proposals and recommendations that is not only about cash payments or what kind of compensation, but it involves things like, removal of Prop 209, that like there's so many clear proposals that are made from the report that don't necessarily coincide with cash payments, although absolutely we need to be serious about financial compensation. And one of the proposals for the report is that there needs to be an entity that really takes that on to continue to try to develop that and to crystallize that. But we can't, I think, and I would agree with you, like we can't just see a price tag and just like stop and be like, no, like we can't because reparations and repair involves way more than simply financial compensation and restitution. Thank you for your question. So we have another question. Is there, from Hildy, is there a way to donate to a general scholarship fund for HBCUs? Are you aware?
Yeah, I mean the United Negro, I think, College Fund supports. You can maybe find the chat in the chat, is absolutely one way of doing some of that. At UC Berkeley, there is an African American initiative where, so because of our own, because of affirmative action here in the state, the university has created its own like sort of separate, there's like a separate organization where individuals can support scholarships for African American students. And so you can think about the United Negro College Fund, and UC campuses like UC Berkeley have created their own specific initiatives for individuals, students of African descent.
Great. So another question from John. Thank you, Hildy, for that question. Question from John. The word reparations has a connotation of cash transfers. Please give us an overview of what reparations are being proposed. The present discussion about reparations within the educational system suggests a mechanism beyond what those of us unfamiliar with the current proposals would imagine. So I guess he's asking if we can just spend a little bit more time talking about what is actually proposed.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, John. And I absolutely agree that that many of us think about the word reparations and we think about cash transfers. I think that we need to do, and I think this is part of this discussion here, should think about should associate reparations with repair. So when there is harm, there has to be repair. I mean, that's what I teach. That's what I taught my kids when they were growing up. And I have a teenager and a tween now. And when there is harm, there has to be repair. So that should be the frame. Of course, we know that the first form of reparations was the Haitian, the independent country of Haiti having to give money, having to pay the French, right? So of course, that's some of our initial sort of thinking around the cash transfers. Some very concrete examples around what some clear recommendations that come out of the reparations task force. And I mentioned this earlier. One is about ensuring that we have more qualified teachers working in schools serving Black children. So I talked a bit about how currently school districts fund their schools based on property taxes. So school districts, that means that Piedmont, for example, is able to pay its teachers more than the Oakland Unified Schools because the property taxes in Piedmont are higher. And so teachers who are qualified are going to go to Piedmont rather than coming to teach in Oakland. Because they're going to be paid more. So what can the state do? And some of this is happening in the state. The state can um, create incentives so that instead of going to Piedmont, teachers can teach in Oakland. And one of the things I'm doing now with National Board is if teachers can become a National Board certified teacher, they can get a $5,000 pay bump so that they can choose Oakland because they too have costs. They want their children, they want to eat, they want to be able to pay rent. So that with the state incentive and more incentives from the state to equal the how we fund schools, teachers don't have to make the decision to teach in Piedmont over teaching in Oakland. So that's one example. The second example is the work that we're doing at UC Berkeley around trying to create a Black Studies curriculum. In my undergraduate course that I teach at UC Berkeley, students at the end of the course say, "Wow, Professor Bristol, I had no idea, right, that these were the various experiences of Black people in the state of California. I had no idea that when I look around this classroom and I see that that you are one of the few Black people in the classroom, that's because of the historic harm caused to Black people." Well, how do we help children and ensure that children don't have to wait until they get to UC Berkeley to have these kinds of conversations around the experiences of people of African descent? We can embed some of this learning, some of this history, some of this her story into their K-12 schooling experiences. And that is another recommendation that comes out of the report. And how do we design that curriculum? Well, that curriculum needs resources. It needs, we have people who are willing to do it, and we're trying to support them because we don't, it's challenging and hard for people to volunteer their time.
Yeah, and if you refer to the report in the recommendations, there are recommendations that also go beyond education. There are recommendations in terms of public policy. There are recommendations around policing and mass incarceration within the state of California. There are recommendations about healthcare and the healthcare disparities that African Americans have faced. So I definitely just recommend that you look to it and consider it, how it is not only something that is probably happening, that is something that happened in the state of California. This is a national issue. This has happened to African Americans throughout the country and to folks of the African diaspora throughout the globe. All right, so we have okay, so I see some thumbs up for increasing funding for Black Studies. That's awesome. Just trying to see if there's any other questions here. Thank you for your comments. Tanya made a comment about, so we have folks in Massachusetts. I'm wondering, Travis, if you happen to know of any resources for folks outside of California, and I've kind of struggled to find this, but like if there's like a central resource where people can find what's happening on, the status of the movement for reparations within their state. Are you aware of any resources like that?
Yeah.
Like if there's a task force happening in Boston and New York or things like that.
Yeah, so I don't know I know that several school districts have created several cities, a couple of cities across the country have created reparations task force. We've had local cities. So San Francisco is engaging in some of this work. Oakland is engaging in some of this work. Northwestern, I can't remember the city where Northwestern, wherever Northwestern is located in the state of Illinois, they've created a reparations task force. some of the places, some of the organizations that I've been really thinking about, that maybe I hear this question, around that folks can point to, is like the Decolonizing Wealth Project. They've been doing some work. I mean, we got connected with Nicole. You and I got connected through the Black Freedom Fund, and that's clearly California based. But I think those are some of the, I think that this point about is, who's tracking all of these varied reparations projects, is an important conversation. I think it's important to note that California is the first state to make formal recommendations around reparations to people of African descent. And as we say in the education policy world, as California goes, the rest of the nation follows. And so I suspect that over the coming months, that we will see many more state legislatures creating formal task force to study reparations for people of African descent.
Yes, so I would encourage you, I would encourage folks to do a couple things. Find out is there a task force on reparations happening locally in your community. There's a task force on reparations happening in my kids' public school district. Is there something happening at the school district level? So, think broadly, but think, close locally to you and how you can become involved. The other thing is, I know Lisa was one of the things that she was going to ask folks to do is to endorse the work of the task force through supportreparations.org. I put the link to that website in the chat. If you go into the report, you can see that there is a number of endorsements of organizations throughout the state of California and outside of California. It is meaningful. So if you can ask your organization, your church, your company to endorse, to publicly endorse the report, they are continuing to update that list, and it does send a message. It sends a message. So we want, folks from both from the private and the public sector to endorse the work. Travis, how can folks follow you or can be in touch with you if they want to engage or learn more?
Yeah, and actually, I just put the link. It was the Evanston city government. Maybe you can just share that with everyone else. So that was another local school district.
Okay.
Another municipal government that has created reparations task force recommendations. So one, I'm on LinkedIn, Travis Bristol, or you can I'll put my email in the chat if you're interested in following up. Can I just, I'll just put it, like sending it to you. Nicole, and you can just, here's more about, so those are the sort of two ways to be in touch.
All right, well, I am not seeing any more questions in the chat. So I will also give you all a link, and we will do this in the notes, but just send you a link to Equal Justice Society's website. I'm so sorry that we couldn't have Lisa Holder on our call, but we will try to record a conversation with her and send it to you afterwards. Feel free to reach out and send me if you have any questions that weren't answered today, but you would love Lisa to be able to help answer. Feel free to send me a note, and we will try to get those questions answered. Thank you so much, Dr. Bristol, for your all your wisdom and your work. And for everyone on the call today who spent some time with us, we really, really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.